Hi, it's Max back again with building a universal JavaScript application. So today I'm going to actually write some React code, which is the framework we're going to be using to build the UI on this app. So first I'm going to talk to you about React syntax, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools we use to actually compile that syntax into JavaScript code that the browser can actually run. Um, I'm going to cover static file serving real quick just so we can serve up the compiled JavaScript. Then I'm going to render some React stuff in the browser, render it on the server, and deploy it to our little Heroku server. All right. So, first of all, why don't I create um, so I'm going to create a folder structure inside of our source here. Now app is going to create the actual universal app. Anything inside of here runs on client and server, basically. Um, there might be just like one main file that doesn't, but everything else will. So inside of that, we're going to put a components folder, and that's where I'm going to put all of the React components. Eventually, I might break down the components folder even further, but for now, just a basic flat components is fine. So let's make a file called hello.js. This file, what I want to produce is just h1 hello. That's all the HTML I want this component to output. So what exact syntax do you need for this? So first of all, let's install React. So npm install save React. We're also going to need React DOM because we're dealing with the DOM, which is the internal model of the structure of HTML that the browser uses and exposes to JavaScript. Um, since React can be used for more than just the DOM, the React DOM is the thing that communicates from pure React to actual talking to the browser. Okay, so for this, I'm going to be using the ES 2015 module syntax. So the way you import code is import React from React. And now class hello extends React dot component. So what I'm doing here is saying this is a class that extends React component. That is totally equivalent to function hello hello dot prototype equals new React dot component. Maybe not exactly equivalent, but pretty close. Um, and how do you convert from this syntax to this syntax? We're using a tool called Babel, which can do any sort of transformation you want on JavaScript code. Um, so this is sort of the basic thing it was built for, converting ES 2015 to older forms of JavaScript, but you can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. As a matter of fact, one of the main things it's used for now is um, it understands the React JSX syntax. So a React component only has one required method, and that is render. And so then you return so how could I just return this blob of HTML? This is the React JSX syntax, and what this is equivalent to is return React dot create element h1 null hello. And this is a very simple mechanical transformation. You can see how it's done, but it's a much nicer syntax to work with, something like this versus this. First of all, this is very wordy. The other thing is it's very different from the generated HTML, and so it's just hard to keep track of what you're actually doing. You can write a whole app like this, though. You aren't required to use the React syntax, but it's much nicer to use it. So I'm going to delete that, uncomment this. So this is our React component. So one other thing about the JSX syntax that you have to keep in mind is you need this React object in scope. So one thing I did early on is you can import using ES6 with a syntax like import, component from React, and then just do component there. And the problem you run into that is this won't work because this compiles into react.create create element. So you need to have this import React line anyways, so you might as well just do react.component. Although you can import component directly, that's fine. I just don't think it's really worthwhile. All right, so we want other code to be able to access this hello class. So the way you do that in ES 2015 is export. Now if we do that just with export, the way you'd access it would be import hello from, /hello, or whatever the path is to it. Which is fine, but it's generally recommended if you have one object that you're exporting, you do export default, and then you can get rid of these curlies. All right, so we've got our little class. We are rendering an h1 with hello. So we want to actually output something, right? So we need to use Babel, and generally you're going to want to use it with some sort of module loader. You can use it standalone, but I'd like to use it with a tool called Webpack, and Webpack basically turns node style requires, so require whatever. It lets you use those in the browser. There's also a tool called Browserify that does the same thing, but Webpack has a lot more interesting features. Whereas Browserify is more based around taking node code and running it in the browser. Webpack is more oriented towards, hey, we've got some front end code, let's try and do something really cool with it. So I'm going to create a folder, config. That's going to hold any sort of config files we need, right? And then I'm going to create a webpack.config.js. I'm going to get a copy of an already working one that I've got because it'd just be kind of boring to watch me type it all out. Okay, here we go. Here is a Webpack config. Um, Basically, we're going to have all of our stuff compiled by Webpack in source app. We've got a main.js. That's just the first file that requires others. And that's pretty much the only file in source app that's not going to it's not going to run both in the browser and in the server because this is just going to run in the browser. And then you tell it where to output. We're going to put it in a public folder, and we're going to call the output bundle.js. We're just looking at JavaScript files for now, and then for JavaScript files, ignore that little thing I just deleted. We're going to use a loader. So in Webpack, a loader is something that lets you load a different type of file or transform a specific type of file. So there is a Babel loader, and you let it know what language extensions you want to use. So we're going to use ES 2015, and we're going to use React. And then one thing you do want to do is tell Webpack what directories you want to actually run these loaders on. Because if you aren't careful, you can have Babel trying to run on everything in your node modules, and that can get very painful very quickly. So if you just don't do any of that stuff on node modules, I tell it, only run on source app. And that's what this include line does. You can also say, like, instead of include, you can exclude paths, that sort of thing. So this is our Webpack config. Why don't we install Webpack, npm install save Webpack Babel loader. And then we also need to install the Babel presets. Babel preset ES 2015 and Babel preset React. Alright, everything seems to have installed correctly. So now one thing I like to do, and this is totally optional, is I like to add a script for any time we're going to be running some command that comes from npm. So what we're going to be running is Webpack, and then we're going to let it know that our config file is at config/webpack.config.js. And I'm going to call this build. So when we do npm run build, it'll do all that. Entry module not found. So what that means is our main.js file doesn't exist yet. So we just create that, main.js. For simplicity, let's just do console.log working. Oh, I think this is main comma JS. Let's rename that real quick. All right. npm run build. Looks like it's worked this time. And you can see the output here in folder public, bundle.js. Here's our console.log working. Now we just need to tell the server how to serve this up. So this line here just tells your Express server use a middleware, and it provides this built-in middleware called static that'll just serve files from a folder, and I said public. So if we start our server and then go to our browser, go to /bundle.js. Why is that not showing up? Public bundle.js. Oh, I forgot to save. Very common mistake. Here you can see this is the same file we looked at earlier. I'll kill that. We're serving these up. Why don't I create a little test page? So instead of sending this string hello world, why don't I send some HTML? I'm going to just generate some HTML. We can ignore most of this stuff for now. Script source equals bundle. We're going to do /bundle.js. Then our JavaScript will run. So if we start this back up and go back to localhost 8080, we can see console.log working is running. So now we want to actually run React. We've got our hello component. It's very simple, but it should produce the HTML we want. What we need to do is actually call React. So import React from React, import React DOM from React DOM, and we're also going to need our hello component. So import hello from ./component/hello. And one last thing is I'm going to add a div with ID main. And then what you do is React DOM.render, and now you need React imported because you're using JSX syntax here. You can manually call React.createElement, but why if we've got JSX syntax all set up? So hello. And then you need a reference to the actual element. So document.get element by ID main. That'll work. There are more sophisticated things you can do here, but it's generally not needed. And then this should run. So why don't we do npm run build. Oh, unexpected token. It's not running Babel loader correctly. Okay, the problem was just simple syntax of the file. Module loaders instead of just loaders. So that should work now. Alright, that's worked correctly. Why don't we start our server again? Alright, here we've got hello, and let's take a look at it. You can tell it was rendered by React because it's got this data React ID. React uses those to map between its internal data structures and what's stored in the DOM. And you can also use that to use your dev tools. You can see we've got a hello component and then an h1 inside of it. I recommend installing the React DevTools if you're going to be doing React development, but you can also just look around in your basic browser, DOM tree, where you can inspect all the elements. Elements tab in Chrome, probably elements in most other browsers. The only thing is that doesn't show you like the tree of components. It only shows you the rendered output. All right, so we've got React running in the browser. We want to have it run in the server. So we need to insert it in here somewhere, somehow. I'm just going to call this HTML. So we're going to need a variable HTML. So let HTML equal. How do you do this? So one little thing you are going to need is because that stuff's all written in ES6 syntax, and now we're not calling Babel, although you could set it up to run that way. What we're going to be doing is we're not using Webpack. We're going to be using Babel's require hook, and so that lets us load ES6 components just like regular Node components. So I do need the Babel register package. So npm install save Babel register. Very good. And now we'll import some modules. Let React equals require React. Let React DOM server will require React DOM/server. So this syntax you might not be familiar with, but basically what it means in Node is this is the folder in Node modules that you're looking for stuff, and then if you put a path after it, it'll load whatever is after that path. So it's generally not recommended to reach into files in a package like this unless it's specifically documented, and this is the way you get the server-side tools for React. So React DOM server takes a React element and renders it out as a string. So what we're going to do is React DOM server dot render to string, and then we're going to do React dot create element, right? And so we also need our hello component. So let hello equals require dot slash, so this is a relative require, app slash components slash hello. And one thing you have to keep in mind is if you're using ES6 modules, so the way Babel will compile this down is it'll never set module.exports directly. Module.exports equal, blah. It'll never do that. What it'll do is module.exports.default if you've got a default export. So if you're consuming it with direct node requires, just do default. And so we're going to manually call react.createElement with hello and null because we're not passing any properties. So there we go. This should work. Let's see what happens. Yes, we're getting an unexpected import again. So Babel register isn't working. I have it installed. Babel Babel register is there. Preset. That looks correct to me. ES 2015 and React. Let me see what's going on. Okay, the problem's pretty simple. Let's move this up to the top. And then it should work. Yep, you need to have the register hook before you require stuff. Seems obvious in retrospect, like most mistakes. So, let's take a look. What happens when we run this app? Hello. However, if we go on the console, you'll see a message. Basically, what this is saying is, you rendered some React markup, we recognize it, but there's some other stuff in there that we don't like. So this is something I actually intentionally did. Basically, you don't want any white space in between your wrapper element that contains your markup and what you insert. Just get rid of any white space here and it'll solve the issue. We've got to restart our server. And no more error message. You can see hello component. And as a matter of fact, if we go to our settings, disable JavaScript, and refresh the page, everything looks fine. View page source. All looks like what you'd expect. But there's no JavaScript running in my browser. All right. So everything seems to be working. the only thing left to do is deploy to Heroku. And that should be very simple. The only thing we need to make sure to do is run this build step. And so one of the scripts that npm knows about specifically is called post install. And so that runs after you've done npm install, it'll do something. So npm run build. And you can call other npm tasks just like that. That's basically how you run some sort of task after you've updated your app in and have it run when you deploy to Heroku. One little thing I want to do, however, is I don't want to commit this public folder because that's all stuff that's going to be built on deploy. So in my git ignore file, I'm going to add it to the end, public. I can go over here. And this is just an interface for using Git. I've got it in Sublime Text. You can see it the same if you do git status. Or I have a shortcut called GS. Just lists what needs to be committed. So I'm going to commit all of this. And I'm going to call it episode 2 because that's what this is. Now let's git push Heroku episode /2 master. Failed to push. That's because I was running through this before and I deployed to Heroku. This sort of thing happens with Heroku pretty often, so just force it to push. npm is installing everything. Looks like Webpack's running. Looks like everything's working fine. Takes a few minutes to do everything. Looks like it's doing some cleanup tasks. Yep, build succeeded. So I'm just going to go to our Heroku app and let's see here. There we go. Hello. So everything's working, deployed to Heroku. We've got React running, we've got Webpack, we've got Babel. These are all of the core components we're going to be using when we're building our universal JavaScript app. Even though we've technically got one right now, because we're rendering on the browser, we're rendering in the server. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of pitfalls and things you need to think about as you go further. So that's what we're going to be covering in this series. The next episode, I think, is going to be a bunch of quality of life things that'll just make things easier to work on the app. So, for example, we won't have to keep stopping and restarting our server and stuff like that. And then I'll get into more advanced topics related to things like routing, testing, all that sort of good stuff. All right, until next time, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know if you like these, if there's anything I should change. Thanks.